Okay, recording is in progress. We are back in Duties of the Heart after a week of break. And for those of you who have this edition, either in the large size or the cute size, we are in the second volume, page 579, I'm going to say. And um, if you're using Safaria, the link is in the chat and it will take you. So you're in section 11 there in chapter 6 of the treatise on submission, or the treatise on humility, the gate of humility. Now, last week, uh, I think it was the last time we met, I think it was a little disturbing for some people for a good reason. One of the things that he was recommending was sort of as part of humility was kind of, it was uh, being what we say being mevater, being giving up on one's own, giving up on one's own honor. And I wanted to just kind of go back to that for a second and to say that there's never a mitzvah to be a doormat, right? There's never a reason for us to be a doormat. On the one hand, we can be too careful with our honor, right? And a person shouldn't be too careful with their honor, right? We don't want to be picky about our honor, picky about the way people treat us, and to also be forgiving of people for their failings and for their shortcomings. But at the same time, okay, we're not invite people to step on us, right? We're not inviting people to step on us, nor are we obligated to stay in situations in which we're going to experience some kind of harm, right? So we're if you're being abused, right? If you're being abused, that's not humility. It's not humility to stay in a situation of abuse. It's stupidity, right? Or it's a lack of courage, or whatever reason you have to do that, or just it's impossible for you for whatever reason. But that's not to say that out of humility a person should have to put up with that.
But on the other hand, you don't want to be toxic like Cyrano de Bergerac,
Right, exactly.
right? I mean, that's like the epitome of I'm
Right,
not going to eat this grape even though I haven't eaten for 3 days, you know.
right, right, right. And that's right, and that's also true. So we have to kind of find the fine line between those two things. Okay. So we are talking about the behaviors which are appropriate to a person, to a person who is humble. So now he says, we wanted to number 5, this number 6. So he says one should be determined and aspiring in matters of the next world. Um, so in relation to the relations of spiritual things, one should not be content with doing whatever comes to hand, and his attainments should never be enough for him. On the contrary, his deeds, service, abilities, and effort should appear negligible to him. He should always aspire to something higher. As scripture says of Jehoshaphat, he says his heart was lifted up in the ways of God. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful image. Yigbah libo b'darchei Hashem. He says his heart was lifted up in the ways of God. That person should have an aspiring heart when it comes to the service of God, when it comes to spiritual things. While we should have a sense of satisfaction with material things, um, and and try to find a satisfaction in material things, and not to be constantly grasping material things, but we should be. But when it comes to spiritual things, we should have constant wanting for more, and not to think so much of what it is that we've done, but again, right? It's a fine line, right? You want to have appreciation for what you do. You're right. You don't want to, because if you don't have appreciation for what you do, then chances are you're not going to want to do it anymore, right? When my daughter was a little girl, right, and we would study together. I would study with my daughter after school every day, and when we would study, we would dance afterwards, right? We would do a little dance, right? We had our after study dance. Now, you know, I it why are we doing why are we doing our after study dance? We're doing after study dance because we want to celebrate that we did something good, right? Celebrate that you did something good because that means that tomorrow we're going to want to do it again, and the day after we're going to want to do it again and again and again and again. So we don't want to be disparaging of our efforts, and at the same time we don't want to be too prideful of our efforts. We want to be somewhere in the middle. So he should express displeasure with himself before God and before people. You have to be careful about doing that before people. I'll explain that in a second. For his deficiencies in religious matters, and ask God for help and the courage to increase his service and good deeds. And he quotes Tehillim, says, "Would that my course be steady in keeping your statutes," meaning that David HaMelech, King David himself, would pray to God, right, to be able to improve his service of God. And so also we should pray to God to improve our service and to help us be able to serve better. Um, and we should be able to say to God where we fall short. Now, when it comes to people, he says here, Shira livnei adam lachnia. You want to be careful. You want to be careful about displaying your weaknesses in front of other people, right? You do that in situations which are safe, right? In a situation where you don't want to be vulnerable, where it's not safe to be vulnerable, then you want to do that. You want to be careful about that. So it says, now, for the honor of the Creator, one should display humility before others and put aside one's pride. When performing an act for the sake of God may be exalted, one should forget his own importance, honor, and dignity, whether he is alone or in the midst of the assemblies. A scripture says of Aaron, in spite of his high dignity of his office, he shall remove the ashes, right? This is Aaron HaKohen, so Aaron, the brother of Moses, who was the high priest, right? He would take out a shovel, right? And he would move the ashes. And of course, he was dressed in this beautiful white robe. And if you're shoveling ashes, right, it's going to get all over your beautiful white robe, right? So he wasn't afraid to get dirty. You shouldn't be afraid to get dirty. Right, you shouldn't be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid of the hard work involved in serving God. The Creator obligated him to remove the ashes to induce lowliness and remove arrogance from his heart, right? Because if you're walking around in this beautiful outfit all the time, right? So he said, okay, yeah, you can be the high priest and you can walk around in this beautiful outfit and you can wear this crown on your head and everything else, but you also have to shovel the ashes. Right. And so we should be the same way with ourselves, right? Even if we have a very exalted way of serving God, and some people do, right? Even if we have a very exalted, dignified way of serving God, still, right? We shouldn't think so much of ourselves, right? We shouldn't think of ourselves as being so ay. As I say, you're not all that. So similarly, it says of David, right, King David, and she saw King David leaping and dancing before God. This was his wife, poor lady. She's looking out the window, and she's looking out the window, and she sees King David, and he was dancing. They were bringing the ark into Jerusalem, and he was dancing and singing. He was dancing and singing, and his clothes were falling off of him because he was in such a state of ecstasy, right? But he didn't care. He didn't think about what other people thought of him. Right, he was just in love with God, and in that ecstasy of being in love with God, he didn't worry about what the world thought of him, right? And so we shouldn't. So in our love of God, we shouldn't worry about what the world thinks of us. They see us as they see us with our looking a little messy. He says, so see the rest of the narrative as well. It says, I will speak of your testimonies in the presence of kings. It says, I will not be inhibited. The lo evosh, I won't be embarrassed. Right? It says, we shouldn't be embarrassed in our service of God. We shouldn't be ashamed, right? Even if it means that we're showing passion, if it means that we're showing an overt love for God, then we shouldn't be ashamed of that, right? So he says, one should be content with whatever means of livelihood present themselves and are attained, because he disdains and has little regard for his bodily self. We should be happy with right? A person who's humble is going to be happy with whatever it is that they have. He should train his soul to forego its physical pleasures and free himself to fulfill his obligations to the Creator for the great favors, many graces he has bestowed upon him. As David said, I will run in the way of your commandments, for it frees my heart. There's a way freeing yourself up from an overemphasis on the physical and on the material world is a way of freeing up your soul. Um, oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Kaylin wrote something beautiful from Nietzsche. It says, what is the seal of liberation? No longer being ashamed in front of oneself. That's beautiful. It's beautiful, right?
I like that one.
Yeah.
Reminds me.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. This thing, he says, lo evosh, don't be ashamed. Shame it's a very, very, very dangerous it's a very dangerous emotion. It's 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 not just toxic, but it can eat you up from inside. It's a very dangerous emotion. Um, so okay, so we should be a little bit, right? We should reduce our attachment to things of the world to free up our soul. 9, for the honor of the Creator, one should take revenge against the wicked. This is a rough one. Okay. Um, okay, what can I say? Um, One's practice of forgiving others in personal matters should not lead him to be forgiven when it comes to God's matters. So it's interesting. So he says, look, when it comes to personal things, we should always be forgiving. When somebody wrongs us personally, right, we should always be forgiving. That should be something, that we're willing to give up on our own honor and forgive them. But when we're talking about the honor of the Creator, right? Because he says here, right, for the honor of the Creator, the kavod haboreh, right? For the honor of the Creator, then maybe we shouldn't. Then he says we shouldn't be so forgiving. So when it comes to God's matters, or toward anyone who speaks against his prophets, pious ones, or treasured people, when one person takes advantage of another, he should not be forgiving, as he is when he is himself wrong. Right? We can forgive when other people wrong us, but not when they wrong other people. Right? It's not our business. It's not our job. When we see that somebody is wronging someone else, it now becomes our obligation to help do something about it and to rescue that other person. We can give up on ourselves and we can say, listen, okay, I don't mind the pain. It's all right with me. I can deal with it. I can deal with the loss. I can take the loss. I can absorb it. But we can't do that with other people, right? We don't get to say, okay, it's all right for you to hurt somebody else. We can't do that. And so we have to, and that again, right? Even if it's our habit to be forgiving of that, that's not a time to be forgiving. He should not forgive when he himself is. He should not be forgiving as he is when he himself is wrong. Rather, he should come to the rescue of the oppressed, help free him from the hand of the oppressor. As it's written, execute justice in the mornings, deliver the robbed from the hand of the oppressor. Right? That's from Yirmiyahu, from the prophet Jeremiah. And then finally, he quotes Iyov, the book of Job, Ayub. He says, Eshbara Mitzvot Ava. It says, I broke the teeth of the wicked, right? I broke the teeth of the wrongdoer, right? So we have an obligation. We have an obligation to overcome an oppressor, right? Although we might accept it upon ourselves, we can't accept it on behalf of anybody else. It says one should speak little and in a soft voice, jest little, and seldom swear in God's name, even in regard to the truth. So now he says it's interesting that this is the 10th and the last. Right? We should speak quietly, peacefully. Right? We should speak in a way that in a way that's quiet. We shouldn't be overly. He says ma'at sechok, right? And a little bit of joking, right? Not a lot, right? Sometimes you meet people and everything they say is a joke, right? And Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal, he says, what is it like? What's a person like who jokes all the time? It's like a person who carries a greased shield, right? Because with the joking, it's constantly deflecting, right? It's constantly deflecting reality. Instead of dealing with things, right? You use humor a lot of times to deflect anything that comes to you, and you avoid truth that way. So he says, don't joke too much, right? He's not saying, by the way, to be humorless, right? That's not there's no mitzvah to be, there's no commandment, right? Anywhere to be humorless, right? It's good to smile, it's good to laugh, it's good to tell jokes, right? All of those things. Even the rabbis of old always used to tell a joke before they taught. Me, I don't do it because I don't tell jokes well. So I don't do it. But they used to do that in order to kind of warm up their audiences. That's the custom. Many rabbis still do that. They tell a joke in the beginning. But me, you don't want me to do that. Trust me. My timing is always off, and nobody laughs, and so it's a waste of time. He says he should not utter any falsehood or keep company with merrymakers. This is a mischakim, people who are jokers, right? People who are just kind of like loosey goosey, or delight in the worldly pleasures of which the vulgar delight. Okay. And he uses the word ame aretz, the people of the land, the vulgar, the ignorant, right? So shouldn't get involved in. It's very interesting. In the book of Ruth, Ruth tells her mother-in-law Naomi, it says, "I will go where you go," right? And that is supposed to be like the beginning of conversion, right? Of a person kind of adopting the Jewish faith. And the rabbis say, what does it mean, go where you will go? And says, I will go where you will go, and I won't go where you won't go. I won't go to the circus. I won't go to the circus. And there begins this discussion in the Talmud about not going to the circus. Now, the circus, of course, is not referring to the circus that we know, but it's referring to the Roman circus, which was basically this torture thing, right? They would go and they had slaves, and they would have them fighting with each other, and they would have animals attacking them, and all sorts of strange entertainments. So that would be a good example of the vulgar delights. Probably bullfighting would be a bad idea. Boxing, mixed martial arts, maybe. I don't know. These are all things which maybe we shouldn't. Professional wrestling, maybe. Although professional wrestling, I don't know, it's sort of like more like ballet. It's just ballet with, sumo wrestling would probably be okay. This should be done this should be out of humility and loneliness, not out of self-importance and haughtiness, right? So if you're going to keep away from these things, right, don't say, no, I'm not going to the boxing match because I am too exalted and good for that. I am too amazing. No, I cannot. No, I can't. I can't watch TV because if I do, no. Okay, out of humility, right? Out of humility, you want to avoid those things, but do it in a humble way. Don't do it in a way that makes you, hey, look at me. I'm Joe, no Netflix. I don't wear a big sign saying I don't watch Netflix. I do watch Netflix. The link, yes. Hold on, Nathan. Okay, and we're a little bit further on than the section I posted, so you have to kind of scoot down because we're almost in the seventh section. Okay, he says, okay, so shouldn't do this you should do it out of humility and lowliness, not self-importance, right? Not to make a big deal of yourself, as the prophet said, I did not sit in the company of revelers, nor did I make merry with them. I sat alone because if your hand was upon me, you have filled me with indignation. Right? He says, I didn't hang out with the mishakim. Right? I didn't hang out with the jokers and the jokers and so on because I wanted to be with God. I was willing to even sit alone, right, rather than to be with God. Now he says he sat alone. He didn't stand there in front of everybody and go, "Hey, you guys are jokers, not me. I'm no joker. I'm no joker. I'm Mr. Godly over here, right? He didn't do that, right? He went by himself. Okay, so go by yourself. Don't involve yourself with people who are unworthy, but at the same time, don't lord it over them. Okay, section 7. There are 5 signs. I love these numbers: 10, 5, 7, 5. There are 5 signs which manifest in a humble individual, verify his humility. Okay, so how do we know whether somebody is humble? Well, we can check for these 5 signs. Okay, sign number 1. So, sign number 1: when a person is at the height of his anger at someone who has disgraced him, whether in word or deed, and yet out of humility and lowliness overcomes his anger and forgives him, though he is able to take vengeance, this is indicative of true humility. Okay, so when we see a situation that a person says at the height of his anger, he is really angry. Okay, when a person is really angry, and because they have been legitimately disgraced, right? And they're able to overcome the anger, and they're able to forgive, and they're able not to take vengeance, even though they could take vengeance, says that's now, by the way, remember this is personal. Okay, this is personal. This is talking about a situation in which it's personal, and I'm not talking about a situation of abuse. Okay, this is talking about a situation which is personal. Somebody has offended you, they've caused you pain. And if you're able, right, and even though you're angry, and even though you really, really feel it, you're able to be forgiving and you don't take vengeance, that's a good sign that you have actually achieved some kind of humility. So 2, after a person has sustained a severe financial loss or a tragedy involving one of his loved ones, if his patience overcomes the shock and he accepts the decree of the Creator and declares his judgment just, this is indicative of real humility and lowliness before God. If you're able, if something bad happens and you can say, this is the Ratzon Hashem, this is the will of God, this is Qadr Allah, this is God's will, this is my Kismet, right? This is what was ordained for, this is what was ordained for me, so if you're able to do that, even when it involves your financial loss or involves some kind of pain in your family, whatever, that's a good sign that a person has humility and lowliness before God. As Scripture says of real humility and lowliness for God, Scripture says of Aaron, when he suffered the loss of his son, Nadav and Avihu. So the 2 sons of Aaron, the brother of Moses, died in a very strange way. Can't describe exactly how they died. They tried to offer a strange fire, whatever that means, and the commentators understand it differently, but they did something and they were killed, right? And they died. And it says that he was silent, right? That he was silent. V'yudom Aaron, that he was silent. Not just, by the way, not just silent. There are 2 different kinds of silence. There's a silence which is restraining speech. The Yidom is a deeper kind of silence. It's a silence that's a stilling of the dam, a stilling of the blood, right? It's a deep silence. So he was deeply silent before God. And says, and as David as David HaMelech, King David says in Tehillim, in Psalms, be silent before God and wait patiently for him. And then he quotes the prophet Amos, says, therefore at such a time a wise person will keep silent. So a person's silence in a moment of trouble is a good sign of their humility, right? If a person is able to keep silent, a person is able to keep in their own, I can't think of the word in English, their hal, they're in their own self, in their own space. Yeah, you have a good translation, Nathan.
Hold their peace.
Hold their peace. Thank you. That's beautiful.
It came up in a Zoom I was in yesterday about the servant of Abraham. It says Vayacharat, some form of charash, and the translation, I think it was the Koren translation available on Sefaria, said held his peace. Yeah.
Held his peace. Beautiful. Thank you. If you're able to hold your peace, thank you. Thank you. That's going to be like that's my phrase of the day, along with tension dysphonia. Which I seem to be my tension dysphonia is coming back, I think. But
Glad I could diagnose,
thank you. I really appreciate that. Your remote diagnosis was right on. So if you're able to hold your peace, even when things are tough, even when you're having financial problems, even when things may be happening in your family, whatever, says that's a good sign that the person has a level of humility. When a person establishes a reputation, good or bad, if he is praised for some good that he did, you should not take it seriously. You should not take seriously the one who praises him. To himself, his deed should be as nothing, to appear too significant to be accepted by the Creator with favor, because it's so little in comparison with what he owes, so much more than this one good deed. So if you do something good, right, and somebody says, it's so wonderful, it's amazing, right? They make in the Jewish world, they always, whenever people give, large donations, they make dinners in their honor, right? And, they put up a slideshow about you, right? They make it, they put up the dinner, they make the dinner in your honor, right? And they give you a plaque and whatever else, right? Don't take it seriously. You know that whatever it is that you've done is just a fraction of what you're able to do. It's just a fraction, right? How much of yourself did you really invest in it, right? How much of your heart, how much of your soul, how much of your being did you really, really invest in this? And there's so much more, so you don't make a big deal out of it with yourself. And he should say to the one who praises him, enough, my brother, my good deed is nothing when compared with my failings. It's like a spark of fire amidst the waters of the ocean. Even if were it of any account, how do I know that it was free of harmful defects that tend to beset deeds that the Creator will accept from me and not reject it and throw it back in my face? Right? It's compared to what I could do, it's nothing. And even if it was something, how do I know that it wasn't? How do I know that there wasn't some impurity in it? How do I know that there wasn't that I didn't come to this with some sort of with some ulterior motive? There's no way of knowing that. How do I know even that my service will be accepted by God? I don't know. So don't make a big deal out of it, right? You say to the person, don't make a big deal. It says, as it's written, and he quotes from Yeshayahu, the prophet Isaiah, says, when you come to appear before me, who asked this of you to trample my courts? Bring no more vain offering, incense, and abomination to me. Right? God is saying to the prophet there, he's saying, you people, you come here with your sacrifices and your incense and all this stuff. Who says that's what I want from you? Who says I want it? But you say, wait a second, God, you said to bring these things. Yes, I said that, but I didn't say to bring them like this. I didn't say to bring them without your head in the game. I didn't tell you to bring them without your heart in the game, right? So who told you to come like this? I didn't tell you to come like this. So how do we know? Right? How do we know that we're coming like that to God? Are we showing up? Are we showing up with everything that we have? Are we showing up with our whole heart? Are we showing up with all of our powers and all of our intellect and all of our ability to think and to feel? It says, all the more should he reject the praise that is baseless, right? This is if it's true, right? Maybe it's true. Maybe I really did these things. He says, if it's baseless, say to the speaker, my brother, it's bad enough that I'm deficient in the fulfillment of my obligations to the Creator. Don't add to my sin, the sin of my inadequacy, the sin of being praised for what I have not done. Right? Please don't praise me for, right? It's bad enough that I didn't do the things I didn't do, but don't praise me for things I didn't do, right? Don't add that for me. He says, for I know more than you of my sins and transgressions. As David, peace be upon him, said, right? He says, for I'm aware of my transgressions. He says, listen, You may think I'm so you may think I'm so wonderful, but you don't know what's going on in here and in here. And you don't know what goes what I've done and what I've done in private. You have no idea. So don't praise me. Don't don't, you don't know that much. You don't know that much about me. So, and if he is mentioned in connection with evil that he's committed, he should admit his failing, right? And not search for excuses in order to be cleared from it and to justify himself, right? So, and he says, she gives the story as he says, she is more right than I. So the story is that the son of Yaakov, Yehuda, was traveling and he saw a woman on the road who was, I guess she thought she was a prostitute, a concubine, some kind, and it was actually his daughter-in-law. It's actually his daughter-in-law, and his daughter. It's a whole long story of why she did this. But she came out sort of she fooled him, and he slept with her, and he gave her certain tokens, gave her certain tokens to show, to hold until he came back and to pay her for her services. And he comes back and she's not there, right? So he doesn't know what to do. So he goes back home, whatever. And she shows up eventually, right? And she's pregnant and all sorts of anger about this and whatever else. And she shows these signs. She shows the things that he gave her. Now, at that moment, he had the opportunity, right, to protect his dignity. And he could have said, so what? I don't know these things because they were his private things. But instead, he says, no, she's more right than I am. And he admits his wrong. He admits, yes, it was me. I did it. And he admits the entire thing, right? And so the idea is if you get, if something bad happens, right, you should admit this is not easy. I'm not saying that this is an easy thing to do. It's very, very difficult. Which doesn't mean, by the way, you should publicize your bad deeds, right? You should not publicize your bad deeds. There's no benefit in doing that because you don't want to seem to be bragging about doing something bad. That's one reason. And the other reason is if God chooses to hide them, why should you reveal them, right? If God wanted our sins to be, printed on our foreheads, one of those floating screens, he would do that. But he didn't do that, right? So with no reason why we should tell everybody every bad thing that we've ever done. Says, okay. Okay. Says, okay. Yeah, she's more right than me. Says he should not try to shame the speaker or deny that what he says, nor should he condemn him for exposing the offense, right? Because of course this is what people do, right? Somebody exposes you for something that you did, or something that right, or a fault of yours, and what do? You go after them, right? And you go after them for their faults. You expose their faults, and you expose and you attack them. So don't attack somebody else. He says instead he should say to him, my brother, what is the extent of my misdeeds of mine you have observed compared with those that you are unaware of, which the Creator has for so long kept hidden from me? He says, hidden from me. If my misdeeds and sins were revealed to you, you would run away from me, fearing God's punishment for them. It says, you think I did this, but you can't even imagine the stuff I've done. You can't even imagine, right? You think that's bad? If you knew the stuff that I've done, you would not be able to imagine it, right? It says, if my misdeeds and sins revealed to you, you would be run away. As one of the poets said, if my neighbors could smell my sins, they would flee and keep far away from me, right? I would stink, right? So, I don't know who this poet was, but okay. And Job said, it's a book of Job, have I, as men do, covered my transgressions? It says, Im kasiti kadam. Hashai, did I cover my transgressions? No. It says, I didn't cover up my transgressions. I didn't cover up the things I've done wrong. Okay, I admit to them. I admit, yeah, if I've done things that are wrong, of course I've done things that are wrong, more than you know. So for it is told of one of the pious, oh no, sorry. If what is said of him is false, he should say to the one who reported it, my brother, it's not surprising that the Creator has saved me from doing what you attribute to me. Says, given the many graces he has bestowed upon me, what is surprising is he has kept hidden misdeeds of mine that are more shameful and much more serious than what you have ascribed to me. That's a great one, right? He says, it's amazing that God has prevented me from doing the horrible thing that you say I did, but amazing even further that he didn't let you know about the really bad things I've done, right? He only just, so he says, I didn't do this one, but it doesn't mean I haven't done other bad things. It says, desist, my brother, and have consideration for your for your own merits, that you do not lose them without being aware of it. He says, listen, the problem is if you falsely accuse another person, right, you're really committing a sin, right? And he says, and even exposing someone else's, even if it's true, right? There's nothing good about exposing somebody else's sins. There's no benefit in that. If you want to help that person, right, you go to that person, and you go to that person, and you very politely and quietly you say to them, you say, please understand that there's this and there's this and there's this and this, and for your good, and you speak to them in a way that's going to be helpful and constructive, right? But to accuse somebody and to point out their sins and point out particularly publicly, right? There's no benefit in that. So you say to the person, say, listen, no doubt that I didn't do what you just said I did. And I probably, and God has hidden from you things which are much worse than that. But really, it's not your business. It's not your business to be saying it to everybody else. It's not your business really to be announcing it to the world. It says, for it is told of one of the pious that he was slandered, and the word reached him, and he sent a basket filled with the choicest produce of his land to the slanderer. And he said, I heard that you sent me a gift of your merits, and send you this gift in return. Okay, so that's because there's a comment in the I think it's the Gemara that that when you speak slander against somebody, then your merits go to that person and their sins go to you. So you swap, right? So the guy was slandering him, and he sent him a basket of fruit, and said, thank you so much, because I just found myself, I got a whole big basket of merits from you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, right? He said, another one of the pious said, many people, when they come to the day of reckoning and their deeds are shown to them, will find in the book of their merits good deeds they didn't perform, and they will say, we didn't do this. And they'll be told they were performed by one who slandered you and spoke disparagingly of you. So too, when the slanderers discover that the number of their merits has diminished, they'll begin to search for them, and they'll be told, you lost them because you slandered that individual. So the person who is slandered will find that he has extra merits in the world to come. And the person who is slandered will find that they have lost merits in the world to come. And they'll go, what happened? What happened? It says, okay. There are also people who will find in the book of their demerits offenses they had not committed. When they protest, we didn't commit this, they'll be told, these were added to your account because you slandered this individual. So as it says, requite our neighbors sevenfold into their bosom the revilement with which they reviled you, O God. It says, this is what the scripture warned us of. This is from Devarim, from the book of Deuteronomy. Remember what Hashem, your God, did to Miriam on the way, right? Miriam was punished. So she was punished for speaking Lashon Hara, for slandering her brother Moses, right? So if we're going to slander other people, right? So we want to be careful not to point out other people's faults, because then, right, we're making trouble for ourselves, and And if we're slandered, try our best to be patient and say, okay, you slandered me. If it's not true, if it's not true, I'm sorry, but it's not true. But there are things that are much worse that you don't know about. Congratulations, right? And if it is true, we admit it and we say, you know about that. That's great. You should imagine the things that you don't know about. So, thoughts. I'm going to stop there because it's 1:46. So thoughts, impressions.
Sorry, I have so many thoughts. This was a very full, and true to life kind of, like, first of all, you slander someone, you end up in small claims court for something, I mean, it's just kind of, I've bore witness to this, and it's like, and what an interesting concept. Yeah. And especially when people publish themselves, I mean, in current day of like slandering.
Yeah,
Yeah, like be
yeah.
careful there. But also, but then on the opposite side of like all these good deeds, and when somebody wants to list their good deeds of what they've done, and I've been the recipient of, but I did this for you and that for you and that for you, and I didn't ask for that.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you to do that. And it kind of reminded me of also the if anyone watches Curb Your Enthusiasm, there's an episode called the Anonymous Donor, and it's about Ted Danson. He was the anonymous donor, essentially was telling everybody he was the anonymous.
Anonymous donor. Yeah,
Yeah, naturally. So
very funny.
but it just reminded me, I mean, it's just so full of like kind of, yeah, what's real humility, and but it's such a kind of it's too fine, where you start feeling like a doormat, but I don't think it's so, I think you can kind of bulk up that line too and really. So anyway, I had a billion thoughts. I really like this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think that comes up again and again with all these things is you sort of have to know where to draw the lines. The lines are sometimes drawn very finely, and sometimes you have to say, okay, on this side, you know, there's a really good example, where how much somebody comes to you and says, I did this for you, I did that for you, this. So, right, how do you approach that? Do you say, you say, oh, thank you, that was you did all that and I appreciate it so much, and then leave it at that, or do you sort of, or do you say, is there a point at which that becomes cumbersome, and you know and your own, and and unhelpful for their humility, right? It's like, okay, fine, uh, you know, do you really want to flatter people like that? We have this, the donor thing is a really good example. Like, you know, we have this kind of culture of celebrating people who do things which are good. Well, that may encourage other people to do good, but it can also encourage them to be not so great people. So
But and that's the highest form of mitzvah, right? That we just we do without
anonymous,
recognition. Yeah, not, but like actually anonymously,
right?
like,
Not as the
that's.
anonymous donor.
Yeah, yeah,
Great point.
and maybe somebody's doing something in that moment, and maybe it was with good intention, but then 3 months later you're hearing,
Right,
but I did this.
right,
And so it
right,
really kind of, anyway,
right.
it's
I know
counterintuitive.
there's one thing that concerns me about it though, because it seems as though if you say, oh, when you say, oh, I've done things that are
Mhm.
much worse, that doesn't seem to me very humble. If you say, it seems to me that if you say, look, I only did what was required, you
Yeah,
know, I did,
yeah.
I don't get any special merit for this. I did what was required.
That's good. I like that.
So
I
I
like
like, I like, I like that
that. Nice.
formulation
Yeah, I like that.
better.
I did, oh, hold on one second. So I did what was required. I did the
Yeah,
need, right? And I like that.
yeah,
That would certainly be much better, I think. Uh,
yeah.
I'll try
Last
that one tonight.
question, and I apologize. It's just like what about if, like, then what is really doing something, with, your heart
Mhm,
without needing any kind of response? Like,
mhm.
I mean, are we really that transactional? And I just don't think we are.
Okay. Well, I think a
Well,
lot of,
maybe we are,
I
or
think
maybe
we
we
are.
are. We
Yeah,
are. I
I think
guess
we
we
are
are.
transactional. You think about it, you know, um, yeah, I, I, I watch bad television programs sometimes. And there was a television program where a guy, was meeting his fiancée at the airport, right?
Oh no, you were watching 90 Day Fiance, weren't you?
And the guy hands flowers to this girl, right? And she says, and he hands the flowers to the girl, and then he gets upset because she doesn't say thank you, right? So, but so you think just really use, but thank you. I mean, it sort of makes sense that you're, coming, it's it it, but people are very transactional, and so
Unfortunately, I know exactly what episode you're talking about.
okay, so that is very depressing for both of us. Um, but it's you know that's I think people are very transactional. I think part of the idea is to become less transactional, right? That's I think part of what humility is all about is becoming less transactional. Okay, more
That's
questions?
helpful.
Yeah,
I'm
Nathan.
curious about the association between don't go to these places but don't be proud about it and circuses. Was that in the tag? I don't see it exactly
No,
in
no,
the
no, not here. No, I was talking about the mischakim, the places of like of inappropriate merriment. He's talking about like the place where the Amorites hang out. And so the rabbis always give that example of the circus, right? The Roman circus as being like that's the ultimate. I guess that's you know,
The
Mm.
gladiators.
yes, the gladiators, right?
Exactly. I'm very curious. Do the rabbis ever, is there anyone before the author who says don't go to these places but don't be proud about it? Because I'm curious because right now on social media there's the Super Bowl is going to come up and
Yeah.
people have started to say like, I'm not one who advocates that everyone should follow every bit of halacha, but these people, they annoy me kind of, even though I have learned Torah from them. They've decided to cash in their chips and say, because I'm not personally a fan of the NFL, I think that I'm going to invoke my halachic authority to say that you should not be watching it, and that bothers me. And
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
Um,
it's a
yeah,
complicated feeling, and
well,
sorry
What
for
about that?
airing the
What
dirty
about that
laundry in front of everyone.
boxing match? That idiot boxing match the other night. The 58-year-old man,
oh,
challenged
yeah,
with like,
I missed that.
I mean, this is the ultimate in,
Yeah.
I don't know, like you're hoping something bad is going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I guess.
That's
By
not
the
exactly my
way,
point.
yeah, it makes sense that yeah, I like this. I like the idea that like we shouldn't be like, yeah, okay, don't go, right? Don't go if you don't want to watch Super Bowl, don't watch the Super Bowl, right? But you don't have
Yeah,
to be like, you
Don't
know,
be holier than thou.
very holier than thou. I'm
yeah,
not,
thank you.
I don't want to, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say anything, but I'm not, I'm
But
not,
I don't do that kind of thing. But I
yeah,
don't do that kind of
it's
thing. No, that's not, no, I don't do
no,
that. I get a
no,
lot of,
no,
everyone just kind
you
of,
know, my favorite one is a Ben Torah. You don't have to say anything, just go like this. A Ben Torah, yeah, you know.
I don't know. In my shul, they have a Super Bowl party, and the guys go and they daven Maariv
Oh,
during the
during the
night.
halftime. Okay, okay, okay,
It's kind of like living in two civilizations.
okay. I'm masking. I accept that. Yes, it says I love Sebastian. Life with the pundit. Life with the pundits, yes. It's um as they say in Sanskrit, pandityam sharanam vraje mityava. That's it. Take refuge in scholarship or death.
I have friends that are way too scholar for their own taste.
Yes, true.
It really gets me sometimes, and I try to
Yeah,
take a deep breath and
take a breath. Okay,
yeah, it's
guys,
like this.
I got another gig in a few minutes. So
Bye, guys. Great
thank
to
you
see
very much.
everybody.
Okay, have a good week.
Thank you so much.
For Monday or so. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.